And we can, again, this is something we'll just talk about briefly, but other things that you can do if you're a professional and you're looking for a little bit of extra money. Production music libraries, basically also called stock music. It's the same as stock images. You can write music or you can perform on music that can be used in a whole different range of things. So each time it gets used, you might get paid, or you might get paid all at once for the track and not get paid again. But that's basically the kind of stuff where ASCAP and BMI comes in. If you're registered, you might get royalties when that stuff gets used on TV. Jimmy and I have both done a lot of that when we were sort of building up to our the bigger game gigs. What? Yes, Sia and Kia. That was one of my earlier Kia commercial ads. So anyway, sample libraries of virtual instruments. If you have an interesting instrument or something like that, and you can record it, you can always talk to us later for more advice on that. But basically, you can sell sample libraries to other musicians. They can be very exciting and fun to do that kind of sound design. If you really like recording your own sound effects, and you should definitely make a custom library, because right now there's not too much of that stock sound effect samples, but in the future there might be. So you should always be building up that sort of private library. And the last thing is that if you already have music, it's done. You don't want to sell it. You want to keep the rights, and you have, let's say you have an original album and you want to earn some money from it. Music licensing is a great way to do that. So it's sort of like production music libraries, except these are albums that are on iTunes and things like that. These are already for sale. So when you hear, like a Jay-Z song in a commercial, that's music licensing. He's getting paid probably 10 times more than he would from any show from 10,000 record sales. This is where most artists make by far all of their money. And I'm dead serious about that. I've made more money from music licensing than all my album sales combined, easily. So Pump Audio is a good site to go to. Taxi, Music Library Report to look up other sites, since we don't want to list all of them here. And then you want to consider whether you want to license the same CD or song to multiple places, or if you want to just go to one and hopefully get something even better in return. So that's sort of the story with that. So we're pretty much all done. So we'll be happy to take any of your questions.
Actually, just have a weird question. For those of you who have to do mixing and mastering as part of your workflow, are there any studio monitors or headphones that you swear by?
I guess we could probably go through each of them. I use a Bayer Dynamic DT880 headphones, so you just look for Bayer Dynamic. In my opinion, this is just my personal opinion, so hopefully I don't offend anybody. Headphones are a much better investment if you only have $200 or $300, because $200 or $300 buys you the best headphones, whereas $200 to $300 on monitors buys you okay monitors, and you still have to worry about your room, which might sound crappy. So,
and if you're living in an apartment, you have to worry about disturbing your neighbors, and yada yada. Yes.
A question about business models. For those of you who do independent work, are you incorporated, and if so, does your company own rights to music, or do you own rights to music and lease them in a company?
No, I just do everything under my social security number. A lot of people, yeah, that's it. I mean, you report it to the IRS, you don't lie or else they audit you, and then you owe them all your money instead of just most of it. So, I think on the Wall of Sound team, Jack set that up as an S corp, which I don't even know what that means. But so if there's anybody who's more legal savvy than that, but
well, I'll add that. So for Impact Soundworks, the sample library stuff that we do, because we deal with so many different clients, we have that set up as an LLC, which is basically we're shielded from liability. It doesn't really affect taxes. If you get a corporation, also shielded from liability, might or might not be better for your taxes. It really depends on what state you're in. Generally speaking, you don't need to make a corporation or an LLC unless you're making enough revenue or working with enough clients that you think there's actually a strong possibility that you actually don't know what to do with all that money, or you actually think you might get sued because you're working with so many different people. But for my personal stuff, I'm just what they call sole proprietorship. So I just pay my own taxes, because most times when you add a business formation on top, you do have to pay that extra fee just to file it. So if you're at the level where you're not making that much money and you have to pay $1,000 extra just to do those taxes, it's not worth it. But if you're making $50,000 a year from just music, it might be worth it, or maybe not. It really depends on your state to some extent.
And just to add to that, if you are a sole proprietorship or just in general freelancing, even if you're incorporated, I would really, really strongly recommend getting an accountant. I used to think, my mom is really independent and she can do it all herself, but But with music, it gets pretty darn complicated, especially if you have more than one thing going on, where you might be doing some composing, you might be doing some licensing, and it gets so confusing. So it's really good to get an accountant, because that actually will save you money. Because if you make mistakes, then you get fees and stuff.
Does that sort of answer your question? Is that in the ballpark anyway?
Yeah.
All right. In the back.
If you've done a bunch of work for a client without a contract and now it's done, should you try to get royalty rights, or are you screwed?
I can answer this.
It's worth asking, but no, I mean it's worth asking, but you can't expect them to have an after the fact contract. But I mean, if you were doing an indie game and it suddenly blew up and it was making tons of money, they'd have to be pretty big assholes to not let you get in on that. So they are out there, but so consider doing contracts first. It's definitely a good idea just to be safe, but it's never necessarily too late to ask.
And well, let me just add though that might be for if it's more informal. If it's something like when I worked on Monkey Island 2 Special Edition, there was a lot of money involved. There's absolutely no contract. It was all AIM conversations. But I have enough faith in Will that he's not going to let his boss dick me over. So that has to play into account too. If you really know the person, if you really trust them.
We haven't gotten around to dicking him over yet. So.
That's on Saturday.
That's the next panel, how to dick over him. No, actually, I really do think that the very first thing that you should worry about once you have the gig is okay, let's contract this out. Let's figure out how this can be mutually beneficial for everyone. No one's going to shy away from a contract conversation, and if they do, then you should probably just assume that they're shady as all hell and just fuck off. About the royalties thing though, that's actually kind of interesting. Most of the time, game companies want a full buyout, which means that they'll pay you the full rate that we listed up there, the 900 to 1,500 per minute. But now they own the music, so you can't okay, well, now you own this, but I'm going to sell it to this other person. Or even in some cases, you can't even say, oh, well, they own this, but I'm going to put this on my website. It's well, actually, now you need permission to do that, and so on and so forth. And it's rare that they get royalties, but you can still ask. And I very strongly encourage that you always at least ask, because, who knows, maybe a publisher will be cool about that.
When you sell music to a client, AAA, whether it's licensed or full buyout, what's your difference in roughly what you charge for just licensing it to them and full buyout?
I'm probably the only person here that's actually licensed and written for AAA. In terms of licensing for AAA, it kind of depends on if you're going through some sort of a third-party company. Because if you're going through an agency or a publisher, they might take their own cut. So you might expect to get maybe, let's say, $1,000 for your average AAA game if you're licensing a single song. So that's non-exclusive. That's not bad. So if you're getting something,
you keep the rights and you can sell the soundtrack.
Yeah, so that would be if you're licensing it and it's still yours. You can still do whatever you want. There's no limitation. 1,000 is about average. But then you'll hear about Grand Theft Auto paid 10,000 or something like that. But that's the exception.
Well, what would you bump that up to for full buyout?
It'd be several multiples of that. And it depends. Oftentimes the company comes to you with the rate, and you kind of have to do the math on it. That's how it was with Monkey Island. That's how it was with the current project I'm working on. And it usually comes out to one of those numbers. So I guess it's usually at least 3 or 4 times as much.
It's totally ass backwards. Everything I've ever done. That. I mean, they start with we 10%. We have no idea if it's going to make anything.
Right. Yeah.
I would say the same for everything I've worked on in the indie field. They come with me with a number. If they don't have a number, I'll be like, look, here's what I'll do it for. Half the time, they're like, oh, okay. And half the time, you just have to.
And whatever number you give them, they're going to go, oh!
Yeah, that never changes. That never changes. They still do that.
Ridiculous.
And work your way down.
Right. Also, it helps if you ask for multiple things. If you're well, can you pay me a little bit more? No. Can I get the soundtrack right? No. Oh my God. Come on. At least give me this. So
at the same
you come
time,
at them with multiple things.
I think it's important because, you can say you worked on Monkey Island 2.
Yeah.
I've done and I'm doing projects where I'm not really making as much as some of the other ones, but just the idea that I get to say I worked on this game, So.
Yeah, that's very important. That goes back to like you have to be prepared. Like even if somehow this company were to go out of business and I wouldn't get paid, and would I be proud to have worked on this? You know, so I agree 100%. Any other questions?
What's the most common format for you guys to submit music? Meaning, if it's a file format, you upload it typically, or do you actually have to send in like a disc recording or tape?
That's a good question. It kind of depends on the company. I think most of the time when we're reviewing stuff, we'll actually just use like MP3, and then once it's like the final version, there, you know, there's usually a little bit of like back and forth, like negotiation with the composer. Like they'll say, okay, could this be a little bit more like that? So MP3 is really fast, and usually actually the composers. Let me put it this way. I think that whatever you do, you should try to make it as easy as possible for your client. So you should set up like a nice, like Dropbox is actually amazing. I love it.
Definitely.
So set up a Dropbox, and then, you know, that's your FTP, and you put all of the files there. They'll usually just tell you, you know, they'll tell, like, for a 360 game, like, you know, 1644 is usually the standard wave format. You know, we'll compress it in-house, so that's, you know, that's what in-house guys worry about. But we're just working to get a final version of something, MP3, and then wait for the...
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I was talking about the importance of networking and stuff. For like solo artists and composers, they want to do stuff they can do networking. So I got some CDs that I can give you on.
Oh, sure.
Started up for $5, just running back, you know, trying to help people the hotel in a sense. So.
Well, if you're networking, you don't want to try to sell it.
No, you know, this is a gift.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Oh yeah.
As long as we're plugging stuff, IPDA does have a DC chapter, and there's an event coming up end of the month, the Global Game Jam. If you guys have heard of it?
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Have you mentioned that already?
We didn't in our panel. I guess I forgot because they mentioned it.
I was going to say, the gimmick is you sit down and you have 48 hours to make a game. It's a lot of fun. It's real quick, and we always love to have music players come in because Lord knows the rest of us have no idea what we're doing with sound.
All right, excellent point. Any other questions? We'll be here afterwards. We'll hang out too. But anybody?
Go once. Go twice.
All right. Thanks for coming, guys. Hope you had some fun.